It wasn't born in the 1950s. He never felt the quiet excitement of a family gathering around a glowing black and white television in a small living room. He never watched the world freeze in disbelief as a new kind of sound exploded through the airwaves. He never held a fragile vinyl record fresh out of its sleeve, never watched it spin slowly on a brand new turntable while a voice unlike anything before filled the room. He never lived in that era. And yet, somehow, he understands it. Tonight, a young boy walks onto a brightly lit stage carrying more than just a microphone in his hand. He carries something invisible, a memory he never lived, a moment in history he never witnessed, and a legacy he never asked for but somehow feels responsible to protect. A judge leans forward, curious. "You're very young," she says gently. "And yet you chose Elvis Presley. Why?" The boy takes a quiet breath. "Because Elvis Presley didn't just make music," he replies. "He changed it." Before him, performance looked different. Singers stood still. The rules were clear. But Elvis brought rhythm, movement, and confidence people had never seen before. The audience reacts immediately. Cheering. Screaming. Excited whispers filling the theater. "That's a big statement," another judge says with a smile. "Most people your age don't even know what the 1950s looked like." "I didn't at first," the boy admits. "My grandmother showed me his records. She told me Elvis wasn't just famous, he was fearless. He blended gospel, blues, and country when people said those worlds shouldn't mix." The crowd applauds again. "Jube clearly studied him," the judge continues. "Yes, ma'am," the boy nods. "I learned that he faced criticism for the way he moved, the way he sounded, even the way he dressed. People said it was too different. Too bold. But he stayed true to his style." It pauses. "And that takes courage." The audience erupts once more. Screams. Cheers. Applause echoing through the stage lights. A third judge leans forward, intrigued. "Are you trying to become the next Elvis?" The boy quickly shakes his head. "No, sir. No one can replace him. I'm not trying to become Elvis. I just want my generation to understand why he mattered. Music today is built on foundations people like him created." "What do you think made him different from other singers of his time?" another judge asks. The boy thinks carefully. "He connected with people. When he performed, it felt personal. He wasn't just singing notes or repeating lyrics. It was expressing emotion, and people felt it. They felt understood." The crowd cheers again. "You talk about him like a historian," the judge laughs. "I think legends deserve to be understood," the boy replies softly, "not just copied." The room grows quiet. "Do you understand the pressure of stepping onto a stage dressed like the man the world calls the king of rock and roll?" a judge asks. "Yes," the boy says. "That title carries history. But I'm not here to claim it." He looks out at the audience. "I'm here to honor it. What do your friends think about this?" "They think it's different," he says with a small smile. "But sometimes being different is how change begins." It pauses. Elvis was different too. The judges exchange impressed looks. One asks a final question. "If Elvis were watching you right now, what would you want him to say?" The boy looks down for a moment before answering. "I hope they say, 'Thank you for remembering.'" The audience explodes with screams and applause. "That's a beautiful answer," the judge says. "All right," another judge adds. "You clearly understand the legacy. Now let's see if you can carry even a fraction of that spirit." Music begins. Soft at first. Decades ago, Elvis Presley didn't just perform, he disrupted an entire culture. He stepped into a world divided by sound and blurred the lines between genres. Gospel met rhythm. Country met blues. Tradition met rebellion. And the world watched in shock. They said he was too different. Too bold. Too much. But that was exactly why he mattered. Because courage never waits for permission. The boy walks onto the stage wearing a borrowed shirt, sleeves slightly too long for his arms, fabric hanging loosely around his shoulders. The microphone stand is still set high from the last performer, towering above him. He reaches up and slowly drags it down. Trying to stand tall. Trying to look bigger than he feels. Inside his mind, his grandfather's old record is spinning again. The crackle of vinyl. The warmth of an old recording. Every note, every pause, every tremble in the voice. It clears his throat the way the old singers used to. The stage lights glow softly. This is for the voices that raised me, he whispers quietly. For the sons that lived inside dusty photograph frames. The music swells. Summer afternoons in the kitchen, the radio playing while the world outside moved slowly. His voice trembles slightly. You were there. It takes a breath. You never knew my name. Another note rises into the air. I'm just a kid with a trembling song, but I'll carry it as far as I can. The audience leans forward. Tonight, he sings softly, a young boy honors an old singer, with an old song in his hands. It reaches the note that always wavered on the old vinyl record, the fragile moment where the original voice almost cracked. But he holds it steady. Strong. Letting it vibrate through the room like the slow spin of a record. It cannot copy every broken edge of the original sound. So instead, he leans into his own voice. And somewhere in his imagination, he sees that familiar smiling face printed on the old record sleeve. This is for the voice that raised me, he sings. The crowd begins to scream. For the summers in the kitchen, when the music never stopped. You never knew my name. But I'll carry your song as far as I can. The final note floats through the theater. Silence follows for a moment. Then suddenly, screaming. Cheering. Applause rising like a wave. A young boy. The stage lights are still bright, but something in the room has changed. The noise that once filled the theater slowly settles into a quiet kind of respect. For a few seconds, nobody moves. The judges look at each other, the audience leans forward, and the boy simply stands there, breathing, heart still racing from the song he just carried across the room. Then suddenly the applause grows louder. Cheering rises from every corner of the theater. People stand. Some clap above their heads. Others whistle, shouting words of encouragement toward the small figure standing under the lights. It isn't just applause for a performance. It feels like applause for a moment, something rare, something unexpected. One of the judges leans toward the microphone, smiling with visible amazement. You know, she says, shaking her head slightly, when you walked onto this stage, I thought we were going to see a child simply dressing like Elvis Presley. Maybe doing an impression. She pauses as the audience quiets again. But what we saw instead, was respect. The crowd applauds again. Another judge nods slowly, clearly moved. There's something very unusual about what you just did, he says. Most people come here trying to be louder, bigger, more impressive than the last performer. But you came here trying to understand someone who lived decades before you were even born. He leans forward slightly. That's rare. The boy listens quietly, still holding the microphone with both hands. A third judge speaks. I want to ask you something, she says gently. When you were learning about Elvis Presley, what moment affected you the most? The boy thinks for a moment. There was a story my grandmother told me, he says softly. She said that when Elvis first appeared on television, some people didn't understand him. Some people even criticized him. They thought his music was too different. Too wild. He looks toward the audience. But my grandmother said something else happened that night. The room grows quiet again. She said that while some people were criticizing him, millions of others were seeing themselves in music for the very first time. A ripple of applause spreads through the theater. The boy continues. He didn't just sing songs. He made people feel like they were allowed to be different. Another judge nods thoughtfully. That's a powerful thing to understand at your age. The boy shrugs slightly. I just think music is supposed to connect people. A small smile appears on one his face. You know what I love about that answer, he says. You're not trying to recreate the past. You're trying to remember why it mattered. The audience claps again. Then the host steps slightly closer to the stage. I have to ask you something, the host says. When you first decided you wanted to perform a tribute to Elvis Presley, were you nervous? The boy laughs a little. Very nervous. The audience laughs with him. I mean, it's called the King of Rock and Roll, the boy continues. That's a big title. When you're a kid standing on a stage thinking about that, it feels like you're holding something very fragile. What do you mean by fragile? A judge asks. History, the boy replies. Another round of applause echoes through the room. The boy glances down at the microphone stand. When I was practicing at home, he says, I kept thinking about the people who first heard those songs. The teenagers who danced to them. The parents who didn't understand them. The radios, the record players, the tiny living rooms where music changed everything. He looks up again. And I realized, every generation has moments like that. A judge smiles warmly. And you think tonight might be one of those moments? The boy hesitates before answering. I don't know, he says honestly. But if one kid watching this goes home and looks up Elvis Presley and listens to one of his songs for the first time, then maybe the story keeps going. The audience erupts again. People clap loudly. Some may even stand once more. One of the judges presses the button on the desk to lean closer to the microphone. You know what I think, he says. I think somewhere, the spirit of rock and roll is smiling tonight. The theater fills with cheers. The boy looks overwhelmed for a moment, blinking against the bright stage lights and the roaring crowd. The host steps forward again. Well, the host says with excitement, this stage has seen thousands of performances. Some loud, some quiet, some unforgettable. He gestures toward the bow. But every once in a while, someone walks out here and reminds us why music matters in the first place. The audience cheers even louder. And tonight, the host continues, a young boy didn't just sing an old song. He pauses for dramatic effect. He reminded the world that legends never really disappear. The camera slowly pulls back as the applause continues. A small performer. A giant legacy. And somewhere between past and present, a story that refuses to end. Because music doesn't belong to one generation. It travels. From record players, to radios, to stages like this. And sometimes, it finds its way into the voice of a child brave enough to carry it forward.